Hey, Bulls and Bears, what's happening? Back with another dose of economic reality. And yes, things are bad and they're about to get worse. Now, many people out there do not see what is happening. All they do is they see what their own eyes show them. And that's basically people are spending money, people are driving nice cars, people are buying big houses, even though sales are pretty much the lowest they've been in a decade for home sales. People are still buying things, is what I'm trying to say. And that's what most people see, but they don't know behind the scenes the reason people are able to do this. And the reason, I think you all know this, it's debt, folks. This economy is completely dependent on people taking on more and more and more debt. And if you don't believe me, you don't have to really be a genius to figure this out. Just think about this, just basic common sense, folks. If the central bank, the Fed, if they wanted to stop inflation, instead of just raising rates, don't you think they would put more restrictions on the banks? Why are banks still loaning out money with no reserve requirement, right? In 2020, we had emergency measures that were implemented to rescue the economy. And one of those emergency measures was cutting the reserve requirement for the banks to zero, folks. That's the first time that's happened in the history of the United States, a zero reserve requirement. For a while, it was 10%. They lowered it down to 3% after the financial crisis. It's been zero now for over 3 years, people. So if they wanted to fight inflation, they would curb the lending by making banks have money in the bank to cover the loans that they're giving out, but they're not doing that. So are they really trying to fight inflation? Or is the increase in interest rates just all show? It's just pretending to want to fight inflation. Well, I think you know what I think. But let's get into some numbers here today. We've got defaults rising, delinquencies rising, late payments rising, and it's going to get worse because inflation's not going away. The cost of living is not going to come down significantly. Do you think that all the businesses are going to get together, all the major employers are going to get together and say, "Hey, let's give everybody 10% pay raises this year"? Does anyone think that's going to happen? That's silly stuff, right? That's not going to happen. So I think we better buckle up, folks, because things are bad and they're about to get worse. Let's talk about this recent data here. And credit card delinquencies hit 3.8%. 3.6% have defaulted on their car loans. That's per Equifax. Now, we talked about that recently, but I want to bring that up again because it's so important to paint the picture on how the economy is going to function going forward with these defaults. These folks are 10-year highs. 10-year highs. We're going back to 2013. And that was actually just coming out of the financial crisis. And here we are. We're at levels now that we were back still during the financial crisis. But we're just getting started. It's going to get worse. So things are going to get a lot worse than they were in 2008. And even with the zero reserve requirement with the banks loaning out money like this, we have credit card issuers, banks that issue credit cards, credit card companies, increasing credit limits in the second quarter of this year, another $6 billion increase in credit limits. So, folks, they're not worried about people's default rates. Obviously, if they were, then they would be reducing credit limits, right? So we have this method of keeping things going just by the way that the banks are deregulated, right? They want to make you think that they passed all this new legislation, that the banks are heavily regulated. It's just the opposite. They've never been more unleashed. Banks have never been more unleashed than they are right now to loan out money. And of course, you see debt increasing because of that. When the debt starts decreasing, that's when you know things have changed. When debt starts dropping, when banks quit giving out loans. It happened briefly in 2020, right at the beginning of the health crisis, but then things were flipped on their head. You know what happened then? Banks were unleashed, reserve requirement zero. Basically, I think a lot of things happened behind the scenes that none of us really are privy to, but I think there was a talk of a lot of guaranteed bailouts for certain mega banks. And a lot of that's not just speculation. Look at what Janet Yellen came out and said. She said some banks are not systemically important enough to guarantee to bail out and to have FDIC cover the depositors, right? So I think that was put out there as a way for these people to cover themselves, right? So they could say, well, we told everybody, we warned everybody, and then once these other banks start failing, they could say, well, we told you so, this is going to happen. So they kind of put that out there, I think, as a precursor, as a warning, so that way they can't be to blame when people lose their money. Some people say they're just going to keep printing enough money to cover everybody and to cover every bank. It's possible, absolutely. I mean, we don't know what these people have planned for the economy. This economy is engineered by the drivers, the engineers, the driver, and we don't know what they're going to do. But what we can do is brace for both scenarios, brace for inflation. I still think we're going to see massive inflation going forward. A lot of people are predicting a crash, deflation, falling prices. We have yet to see that, and I've been pretty much right about this now for 3+ years, saying there wasn't going to be a crash, there wasn't going to be deflation, that inflation was going to be here to stay, and I think it's going to get worse. We've got oil today, $86 a barrel, so you're going to be paying for it at the pump. We've got mortgage rates rising, affordability is dropping for home buyers, but yet prices are still staying sticky. All right, so what's going on? We don't have many people selling their home because rents are also high, and hardly anyone's talking about that, right? Who wants to sell their home and then go rent someplace and your rent's just as much or more than it was for your mortgage, right? These people that bought homes at rock bottom mortgage rates, 2.9, 3%, 3.1%, they're going to be unlikely to sell unless we see major falling rents. Now, in a recent report, a couple reports ago, we talked about how rents are starting to fall. In fact, rents fell for the first time in August, for the first time in 6 years. From July to August, they fell for the first time in 6 years. So that is something to keep an eye on, because if rents start dropping and it becomes more of a bargain to rent versus owning, even people with low mortgage rates are going to start selling to go ahead and rent and to cash out, take their equity, cash out and go ahead and rent, and have a much lower rent and much low monthly payment on housing. So that's something to keep an eye on, rents, and it does affect the housing market, right? Well, let's talk about the markets. People say, oh, the stock market's strong. What's going on? How can the stock market be going up during these times? Sure, it's been going up, but we've yet to reach the all-time highs that we saw back in late 2021. And that's every index, right? Dow Jones Industrial Average still hasn't surpassed the all-time high. It was about 36,400 at the end of 2021. We're at 34,600. That's the Dow Jones. The NASDAQ still way off the all-time high. This was back in November 2021. The NASDAQ, we hit about 15,900. We're at 14,000, folks, in the NASDAQ, way off of the all-time high. Let's take a look at the S&P 500. This was December 2021. We were at about 4,790. Recently, we're at about 4,496, right? Every index still off the all-time high. So if somebody bought at the end of 2021, we're nearly 2 years beyond that, and these people that bought back then at the height, at the peak, still haven't recouped their money. They're still underwater. They've still lost money. So I would say 2 years, and we still haven't beat the all-time high at the end of 2021. I would say that's not a very strong market. It may seem strong considering everything that's going on, considering all the levels of debt out there, consumer debt. We have credit card debt past $1 trillion now. We have every type of debt, worse now than what it was before the financial crisis hit. So things are bad, and they're about ready to get worse because the cost of living is not coming down. Wages are not going to keep up with the rising costs. Absolutely not. We have the OPEC nations, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and some of the biggest ones actually are joining the BRICS countries to go against the dollar. So we've got that. Plus, they're cutting production on oil, and that's going to make prices go up even more, and that's going to hit consumers even harder. So you think the credit card delinquency rates are high now, you think the car loan delinquency rates are high now, just wait until a few more months here, and things are going to get a lot worse. And again, we'll be right, and we'll come back and we'll do more videos saying we were exactly right. Look what happened. And people will still say down in the comments, that I'm wrong. Not many of you though. It's much less now than it used to be. I used to get at least maybe 3 to 4% of the people saying no, 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 this is the and my thumbs up ratio in these videos would be about 96%. Lately, it's been 98, 99%, 99.1. People are coming around. They're realizing, that what we're talking about here, it makes sense, right? And again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. Just look at the levels of debt. Look at how they have to keep banks loaning out money, increasing the credit limits. If they wanted to stop inflation, they would regulate the banks, decrease the credit limits on these credit cards. There's people that file bankruptcy that go out and run up more debt in the months following filing bankruptcy. Why? Why is that? Because the money's fake. They can just create it at the click of a mouse, and banks know that. So therefore, that's why they loan out money. If it was backed by something tangible, like gold or silver or both, banks wouldn't do that, and you would see the cost of living plunge. You would see the housing market crash by 90%. You would see car prices crash by, I'd say, also 80, 90%. If we went back to money backed by precious metals. And I think ultimately that's where we're going. So we're still a ways off. We're going to have a lot of an inflationary nightmare to go through before that. I think before people wake up, and we're going to have to hit rock bottom before we start climbing up and realizing, where we messed up. And then pretty soon everybody's going to be talking about what we talk about here, how the money was fake, how they just created endless amounts of money and threw it at the problem. And it added fuel to the fire. It made costs go up even more. It made people get even more behind on their rents. We have people still today that still can't pay their rent. We just ended the eviction moratorium here in Oakland, California. I shouldn't say here because I'm in San Diego, but here in the state of California. And we're going to see how that's going to play out. I think they're going to have to re-implement that because there's going to be so many homeless people. We see what's happening up in LA. Evictions are increasing, and people still haven't really been things haven't been normalized yet. Things haven't gotten back to where we were pre-2020, right? We still have the moratoriums, student loan payments right around the corner. That's been 3 years. They didn't have to make their payments. Still that zero reserve requirement with the banks. There's a reason for that. They know that this whole thing, this whole economy, this whole economic illusion, the gross domestic product, what's known as GDP, they know that's dependent on people spending money that they don't have. Therefore, the banks have to remain unleashed to be able to loan out all this money. A quick story. I was talking to the gentleman up at a local car dealer. Some of you might remember the video that I did walking around the car dealer. And I talked to one of the guys working there. And basically he says it's very difficult to move cars right now. He says they're being undercut by the big mega lenders like Carvana. Carvana has their own financing, and they're being undercut with the APR, right? So they're not able to offer a competitive APR compared to the big banks and even big lenders, online lenders like Carvana. And he said it's very slow at the car dealership. A lot of people coming in looking to get qualified, but they're not able to get qualified, or the rate's too high where it's putting the payment out of their reach. So that's just what I'm hearing from one local car dealer. I mean, what are you feeling out there? Are you seeing friends or family looking to get a loan and they're not getting qualified, or are people still getting qualified even though prices are still crazy, ridiculous high with vehicles? But just one local dealer that I talked to here definitely says things are slowing down a lot, and it's getting very, very difficult to get cars moving off of the lot. And we've got rates about to go higher, including mortgage rates. Why? Because the 10-year yield is surging once again. In fact, today it hit 4.26. I say today. I'm still recording this on Tuesday night. We'll see what happens on Wednesday as this video is airing, as it's live. But it's 4.26. It took another big spike up there. Then you're going to see a big, big spike in mortgage rates. And, this is going to be more pain. And eventually, homeowners that are also buried under a lot of debt on average, and also a lot of them living paycheck to paycheck, a lot of these homeowners are house poor. They're going to be forced to put their home on the market. And that's when we're going to see things really start speeding up to the downside when housing starts coming down. When housing starts coming down, folks, look out. It's coming down just a little bit, but when we see this accelerate, combined with all this debt, delinquencies rising, the banks can keep loaning out money. Yes, yes, but that's only going to cause more inflation, right? So they're between a rock and a hard place, right? The planners that don't want inflation to go out of control, they're having a hard time because they can't cut rates because inflation is going to skyrocket even more. They want to keep the banks lending because that keeps the illusion alive with economic activity dependent on people going into more and more debt. But if they cut the banks off, if they restrict the banks from lending, then the scheme comes to an end as well, right? So interesting times, folks. Everything is going to accelerate from here, in my opinion. And we'll keep an eye on it for you. We'll be back for daily reports, or at least as often as I can. Please make sure you like, subscribe, because it's very important now to keep an eye on all these things here as we go into the last 4 months of 2023, everybody. Thanks for being here. Keep stacking, everybody.